Hello there, you're watching Canal Algérie, and I'm your host, Zachary. Coming up next in our news. The President, representing the President of the Republic, the Foreign Affairs and Community of Prague, Minister Umtala Mamra, takes part in the Paris National Conference on Libya. The Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Lieutenant General Saeed Chingri, in an inspection visit to the Automotive Equipment Restoration Department in the West Military Region. The national football team snatches a praiseworthy victory over Djibouti ahead of the decisive game versus Burkina Faso next Tuesday as part of the 2022 World Cup qualifiers. Good evening, those were today's stories. Top stories first in our news. The Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad Minister Umtala Mamra, representing the President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune, takes part in the Paris International Conference on Libya. Algeria's decision to participate in this meeting is made with the aim of making the commitment of the country's high authorities concrete. The details with Manal Maafa in this report.
6 weeks ahead of the Libyan presidential and legislative elections, the international community met for an international conference on Libya on Friday in Paris, France, to express its support for the transition in Libya. A conference co-chaired by Libya, France, Germany and Italy, aiming to master the conditions necessary for the success of this process. It was the Foreign Affairs Minister Umtala Mamra who attended the meeting as a representative of the President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune, where he stressed the contribution of such a meeting to the strengthening of the international consensus on the rejection of violence and the need to prioritize the inter-Libyan dialogue, while strongly condemning the continuous foreign interference and the perseverance of some external parties in violating the arms embargo, despite their commitment to comply with the conclusions of the Berlin Conference and the resolutions of the UN Security Council. Algeria supports a permanent, comprehensive and final solution to the Libyan crisis, conditioned by the concerted principle of national appropriation that allows the Libyan brothers to assume a pioneering and a leading role, as the President of the Republic often stressed. Umtala Mamra recalls that Algeria has strongly supported the initiative to stabilize Libya and welcomed the sovereign approach enshrined in the treatment of the situation in this brotherly country. Algeria stressed the imperative of the unification of Libyan military and financial institutions, as well as reaffirmed its readiness to contribute to the success of the Libyan national reconciliation process in cooperation with the African Union. These positions, reiterated by Algeria's head of diplomacy, are indeed in the resolutions of the conference, where its participants reaffirmed their respect for the sovereignty and independence of the territorial integrity and national unity of Libya. They also said that they are opposed to any foreign interference in the domestic affairs of the country, as well as their support for the action plan of the withdrawal of mercenaries, foreign fighters and foreign forces from the Libyan territories.
Before the beginning of the conference's proceedings, the Foreign Affairs Minister Umtala Mamra had talks with his Saudi counterpart, Prince Faisal bin Farhan. They exchanged views on the current situation in Libya and on general issues in the Arab world, in addition to discussing the preparation arrangements for the upcoming Arab Summit to be held in Algiers.
Well,
actually the meeting is part of a long-standing tradition of consultation and coordination between the two brotherly countries of Algeria and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. As I recall, it was recently that Algeria's Premier, Ayman bin Abdurrahman, paid a visit to the kingdom and took part in the kickoff of an important program for the whole region. And I can assure you that we always meet to proceed with an agenda of international matters, to discuss and coordinate accordingly, as our positions and efforts are always coordinated.
Still on the sidelines of this conference, the Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad Minister Amra met also the Assistant or the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, Yael Lampert. The Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Lieutenant General Saïd Chengriha, paid on Friday a work-in and inspection visit to the Automotive Equipment Restoration Department of Dar el Baida here in Algiers, belonging to the 1st Military Region. The insights within Eskilo.
This visit is part of the follow-up by the High Command of the National People's Army of the performances of the support department. The visit was attended by the Secretary General of the Ministry of National Defense, the Commander of the Forces, Commanders of the National Gendarmerie, the Commander of the 1st Military Region, heads of departments of the High Command of the People's National Army and of the Ministry of National Defense, as well as the Army General Controller of the Army and Central Directors. After the welcoming ceremony, the Lieutenant General listened to a presentation by the Central Director of the Materials Department, to hold then a meeting with the executives and staffs of the Automotive Equipment Restoration Department, where he gave an orientation speech in which he underlined that in order to fight new generation wars, it is necessary to revisit with attention the history of our country. He said in his speech, quote, "On this occasion, which comes a few days after the celebration of the 67th anniversary of the outbreak of the Glorious Revolution of November 1st, 1954, I would like to emphasize that colonialism realized early on that direct confrontation with peoples had become useless and caused it many losses. Thus, in order to effectively counter this new type of war, we must revisit the history of our country to understand a sample of the methods of this type and devise ways to thwart it." And Lieutenant General emphasized that French colonialism had relied on psychological warfare methods from the very beginning of the occupation, with the aim of forcing the Algerian people to completely abandon all forms of resistance. He also said that, quote, "In this context, historians have unanimously agreed with the fact that French colonialism relied on psychological warfare methods from the very beginning, especially through the use of deception and spreading the idea that France's occupation of Algeria was aimed at helping its population to civilize, and that the French army is an unbeatable army and there is no point in confronting it." This was the case until the patriotic and conscious youth realized, especially after the massacres of May 8, 1945, that war is taken by force can only be restored by force. These heroes actively sought to raise these malicious ideas from the minds of the Algerians in order to revive the spirit of resistance in their souls, to fight and defeat it, and to restore the glories of the nation. End of quote. The Lieutenant General also stressed that in order to defeat this kind of new wars, it is imperative to follow the example of our forefathers in confronting and thwarting this new type of war, the bonds of our nation unity, and working to highlight what unites us and keep us away from what divides us, and restore confidence in our capabilities to actively contribute to building the new Algeria under the leadership of the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense. Thereafter, Lieutenant General inspected the several workshops, such as the vehicle restoration workshops. He also inquired about the prototypes of the materials of the stewardship, designed and realized with the contribution of the Central Directorate of Stewardship, where he urged the persons in charge, the executives and the employees of this department to work without slackening, to promote the chain of technical and logistic support at the expected level, to take care and to make this industrial facility a link of the fruitful achievements, and to concretize the objectives for which it was carried out.
To a different story now, the Interior Minister Canal ended his visit to Spain, during which he had a working session with his Spanish counterpart, Fernando Grande Marlaska, on developing cooperation between the two countries. Canal was equally received by the Spanish Civil Defense Director, Leonardo Marco. The two had talks on the acquired experiences in fighting natural disasters, especially wildfires. A presentation of the Spanish Traffic Management General Directorate and the methods it implements in opening up roads and major axes was heard. The South African International Relations and Cooperation Minister, Mrs. Naldi Pandor, arrived in Algeria for an official 3-day visit. The head of the South African diplomacy was received by the Health Minister, Abdurrahman Ben Bouzid, the Culture and Art Minister, Wafa Shalal, at the International Houari Boumediene Airport here in Algiers. Mrs. Naldi Pandor stated that she is here at the invitation of her colleague Rumtala Mamra, and her visit is paid in the context of strengthening long-established relations between Algeria and South Africa, as she put it in a statement to the press.
Naledi Pandor, I'm the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa, and I'm here at the invitation of my colleague, Minister Lamamra. We are working hard to strengthen the relations which are long established between South Africa and Algeria. So I'm very pleased to be here to give greater impetus to cooperation between South Africa and Algeria.
Algeria is determined to diversify and increase its non-hydrocarbon exports. To that end, operational mechanisms are set by the Trade Ministry with a view to putting more Algerian-made products on international markets via a digital platform designed for operators to help them promote their products abroad. Rania Al-Bahari has more.
Several operational measures coordinated with various actors have been taken by the Trade Ministry to help increase non-hydrocarbon exports, which are estimated at the national level between $4 and $5 billion by the end of this year. We had our first export experience in 2000. We repeated this experience with a Tunisian customer in 2014. Things are going well. Our goal is to create job opportunities and wealth for the country. The production capacity of our company is 10 million bags annually, and we aim to reach 40 million bags per year. The measures taken by the Trade Minister Kamal Rizig are intended to introduce the Algerian products to foreign markets.
Set up a new working methodology based on franchising to develop more efficient sectorial mechanisms and thus support producers and exporters in order to place their products and services on international markets, particularly the Arab and the African ones.
The Trade Ministry put in place a digital platform to help economic operators and Algerian ambassadors discover the local products and promote them internationally.
To the Sahrawi file now, Chief of Staff of the Sahrawi Army, Mohammed Al-Wali Keik, affirmed that the Sahrawi Army is entirely ready to liberate all the occupied Sahrawi territories and recover independence. He calls on all commercial companies not to invest in the occupied territories since it's a war zone and insecure. The Sahrawi Army Chief of Staff spoke on the eve of the anniversary of the ceasefire violation by Morocco on November 13, 2020, in the occupied region of El Guerguet. Moving on now to sports, the national football team on the way to the third decisive round of the World Cup 22 qualifiers following its large victory over Djibouti with 4-0 in Cairo Stadium in Egypt. Our sports reporter Mirouh has more details.
Champions to book their spot in the third round of the competition. Algeria tops now the Group A with 13 points, followed by Burkina Faso with 11 points. And
that's it for me and the rest of the team. Thank you for watching. Take care.